The sky above the burning city turned red as ships fell like dying stars. Explosions painted the horizon while the air filled with the smell of fire and metal. The Galactic Empire's warships circled above like vultures, hunting for any survivors in the middle of that chaos. A single human dropship descended through the flames. Its hull was torn, its engines screamed. But it did not stop. Inside sat Captain Mason, a human soldier known for doing the impossible. He was here for one person, the alien ambassador's daughter, Lyra. Lyra had never seen war before. She had only read about it in archives now. Trapped inside a collapsing embassy tower, she felt the ground shake as plasma bolts hit the walls. Her guards were gone. Communication was silent. Only one voice came through the comms. Deep, calm, and human. "This is Captain Mason of the Terran Defense Force," the voice said. "Hold your position, I'm coming for you." She could not believe it. Humans were the most feared species in the galaxy. Once warriors of unmatched ferocity, now believed extinct after the final war. Yet here was one risking his life to save her. A member of the very species that once helped destroy Earth. The dropship crashed into the courtyard. Its ramp slammed down. Mason stepped out. Covered in soot and blood, his armor cracked, but his eyes sharp and alive. "Move," he said firmly. "If we stay here, we die." Lyra hesitated for only a moment, then ran to him. Around them, alien soldiers screamed orders. Blaster fire echoed across the plaza. Mason raised his rifle and fired without hesitation, every shot precise, every movement efficient. He was fighting not just enemies, but time itself. A blast threw them off their feet. Mason landed hard but rolled up instantly, grabbing Lyra's arm. "We're not done yet," he said. She could barely breathe, her heart racing as they sprinted toward the evac point. The city's power grid collapsed, plunging everything into shadow. Only the fires lit their path. The comms buzzed again. "Captain Mason, enemy reinforcements incoming, you have 60 seconds. "Copy that," Mason replied, his voice steady as stone. They reached the extraction pad. But the shuttle was gone, destroyed by enemy fighters above them. 3 Trivax bombers turned for another run. Mason looked up, then back at Lyra. "Stay behind me," he said, pulling a signal beacon from his belt. "If this works, we live. If not, well, at least we tried." Lyra wanted to speak, to thank him, but words failed her. She had seen bravery before, political, ceremonial, hollow bravery. But this was different. This man faced death with calm acceptance, as if saving her life meant more than his own survival. The bombers dived, the sky flashed, and Mason triggered the beacon. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the air split open with light, a massive human frigate uncloaked above them. Its hull bore the symbol of the long-lost Terran vanguard. The ship's cannons fired, tearing the bombers apart in seconds. Lyra fell to her knees as debris rained down. Mason helped her up. "Let's go," he said. "They'll be back." They boarded the emergency lift, rising toward the frigate's hangar. Lyra looked at him, her voice trembling. "Why did you come for me?" Mason didn't answer at first. He stared out at the burning city below. "Because someone has to," he said quietly. "And humans don't forget their debts." The words stayed with her long after they reached safety. Hours later, she woke in a medical bay. The human ship was silent except for the hum of engines. Mason was gone. Only a note was left on the table beside her bed. The message read, "One day you'll understand why we fight." That day became a legend. The galaxy thought the humans had vanished after the war. But whispers spread among the surviving soldiers of the Empire. They spoke of a ghost, a human who saved an alien princess in the middle of a burning world. Years passed, wars ended, empires rose and fell. Lyra grew from a frightened girl into a leader of her people. But she never forgot the human who saved her life. She searched every archive, every record, every battle log. Yet there was no trace of Captain Mason or the Terran vanguard. It was as if they had never existed until one day, decades later, a strange signal appeared in deep space. It carried an ancient human encryption code, one no alien system could decode. But Lyra recognized the symbol, the same one she saw on the ship that rescued her. Her heart pounded. Could it be him? After all these years? She ordered her ship to set course immediately. Her advisors warned her it could be a trap, that humanity was gone forever. But Lyra only smiled faintly and said, "Some debts are never forgotten." As her ship jumped into hyperspace, the galaxy unknowingly turned toward a moment that would change everything. A meeting that would silence even the stars. The stars outside Lyra's window streaked into long silver lines as her ship entered hyperspace. She stood silently, her hands gripping the edge of the control panel. Her mind was a storm of memories and questions. Could it really be him? Could Captain Mason still be alive after all these years? The crew watched her in silence. They knew this mission was not political, not military. It was personal. The woman who once led peace talks across empires now chased a ghost from her past. A human ghost in the command chair beside her. Her advisor Jaren spoke softly, "Your Majesty, if this signal truly belongs to a human vessel, then we are heading into forbidden space. No one has ever returned from that region." Lyra nodded slowly, her silver eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Then maybe it's time someone did," she replied. The signal pulsed again, faint but steady. Like a heartbeat in the void, the coordinates pointed toward the edge of known space, near the place where humanity vanished centuries ago. That signal, that symbol, was the same one from her rescue. As the ship traveled deeper, the stars seemed to thin out, replaced by black clouds of cosmic dust. Even the scanners struggled to see ahead. It was said that humanity's last fleet hid somewhere beyond this sector, waiting for a day that never came. Lyra closed her eyes and remembered that night long ago. The fire. The fear, the human voice in her ear telling her to run. She remembered his face, calm even in chaos, and his final words, "One day you'll understand why we fight." At the time, she didn't understand. She thought humans were violent, reckless, dangerous. But now, as she ruled a fragile peace between star systems, she understood. Humanity had fought not for conquest, but for survival, and for those who could not defend themselves. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. "Unknown contact ahead," the pilot called. Lyra's eyes snapped open on the screen. Something massive shimmered into view. A colossal shadow, half hidden in the nebula. A starship, ancient and silent. It was unlike any modern design. Its hull was black as night, marked by glowing lines of red energy, symbols of the Terran vanguard still faintly visible. The crew gasped. None had ever seen such a thing. "Open a channel," Lyra ordered. Her voice was calm, but her heart pounded. Static filled the air for a moment, then a deep, gravelly voice replied. "Identify yourself." Lyra froze, that voice, and it couldn't be. "This is Queen Lyra of the Varelian Accord," she said carefully. "We received a signal from this sector, an ancient human frequency." Silence followed. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "Queen Lyra, you were just a child last time I saw you." The bridge went completely silent. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "Captain Mason?" The comm crackled, and then came his quiet reply. "It's been a long time." Tears stung her eyes. For years she had doubted her memories. Now they stood before her, the proof that humanity had not died. "Requesting permission to board," she said. Mason hesitated. "Your people fear us," he said. "Why come here now?" "Because I owe you a debt," she replied. "And because the galaxy has forgotten the truth." After a pause, the human dreadnought slowly extended a docking corridor. The two ships connected with a deep metallic thud. Lyra stepped through the airlock with her guards. But the human soldiers waiting inside were unlike any she had seen. Their armor was old yet perfectly maintained, their eyes sharp. But behind them stood a man, tall, gray-haired, his armor scarred but his gaze strong. Captain Mason. He looked older, yes, but unmistakable, the same calm presence. The same quiet strength. Lyra felt her throat tighten. "You survived," she whispered. Mason gave a faint smile. "We always survive," he said. They walked through the massive corridors of the human dreadnought. It was like stepping into a legend. Walls lined with old banners, names of lost worlds engraved in steel. Thousands of humans moved in silence, maintaining ships that the galaxy thought had turned to dust. Lyra looked around in awe. "All this time, you've been here?" Mason nodded. "Waiting," he said. "Watching it for what?" she asked. "For the right moment," he replied. "Humanity doesn't fight for revenge. We fight when the galaxy forgets why peace exists." His words sent a chill down her spine. The weight of his meaning was clear. They had never vanished. They had only prepared. As they reached the observation deck, Lyra looked out and saw hundreds of ships drifting in formation beyond the nebula. Silent giants hidden from history. Mason stood beside her. "The galaxy thought humanity was gone," he said quietly. "We let them believe it. Because sometimes fear keeps the peace better than memory. Lyra turned to him. The galaxy needs you again, she said. War is rising, and without humanity, it will destroy everything. Mason looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said softly, "Then maybe it's time the galaxy remembered who we are." Outside, the black ships powered up, engines flaring like awakening suns. The lost fleet of Earth began to move again after centuries of silence, and as Lyra watched them ignite the void, she finally understood the promise he made long ago. "One day, you'll understand why we fight." Now she did. Humanity didn't fight for dominance. They fought to protect the light, even in the darkest corners of the stars. The blackness of space rippled as the lost human fleet drifted into the light. Their ships were old yet alive, forged from a time when humanity fought entire empires alone. Each vessel carried the scars of forgotten wars, yet their engines burned with steady fire. For centuries they had waited, silent guardians hidden in the void, and now they moved once more. From her command deck, Queen Lyra watched through the glass as thousands of human dreadnoughts formed up with perfect precision. It was not just a fleet, it was a reminder, a message carved in steel. Humanity had returned. Captain Mason stood beside her, his face calm, his hands clasped behind his back. "We never wanted to come back as conquerors," he said quietly. "But peace built on lies never lasts." Lyra turned toward him. "The galaxy believes you vanished. Your name became legend. Your people became myth." Mason's gaze hardened. "Good," he said. "Myth keeps the arrogant awake at night, far beyond the nebula. In the shining halls of the Galactic Council, 1,000 alien diplomats argued in panic. Holograms flickered with reports, energy readings, fleet movements, intercepted signals, all pointing to one thing: humanity, alive and armed. "The Terrans were destroyed," one shouted. "It's impossible." Another replied, trembling, "Tell that to the dreadnoughts forming outside the rim." The council chamber filled with fear. For centuries, the galaxy had lived in false comfort, thinking the Death Worlders were gone forever. They had mocked human courage, rewritten history, called themselves saviors of civilization. But now their satellites captured the impossible, ships carrying the ancient Terran insignia awakening in the dark. Meanwhile, back in the nebula, Mason briefed Lyra on the truth. Holograms lit the room, maps of the galaxy, coordinates of secret human colonies, records of hidden outposts. After the final war, Mason explained, we didn't die, we withdrew, we rebuilt, and we waited, because one day the galaxy would forget the cost of peace. Lyra listened, silent and awed. The scope of what humanity had done was beyond imagination. Whole generations raised in exile, rebuilding in secret, while the rest of the galaxy believed they were dust. Why now? She finally asked. Why reveal yourselves now? Mason looked at her with eyes that carried centuries of pain. Because the same empire that started the war is rising again. The Trivax Dominion has been arming in the shadows. They call it defense. I call it preparation. Lyra's heart sank. She had signed treaties with those same leaders, believing peace had changed them. But if Mason was right, then the galaxy stood on the edge of another nightmare. What will you do? She asked. Mason's answer was quiet but firm. We will remind them what happens when you threaten Earth. The human fleet began transmitting a signal across every known communication channel. It was not a declaration of war, not even a threat. It was a simple message written in ancient Terran standard. Humanity endures. Every world received it. Every empire froze. The message echoed through stations, colonies, and palaces. It spread faster than light. Children whispered it in the streets. Veterans wept in silence. Leaders stared at their screens with dread. Back in the council chamber, one alien commander slammed his fist on the table. We must act before they do. Humanity cannot be allowed to return. But an older voice, and the voice of the council speaker, spoke softly. If the Terrans have returned, then war is already lost. You cannot stop what cannot die. In orbit, Lyra's ship accompanied the human flagship. She stood at the window, watching as the dreadnoughts spread out like black wings. The light from nearby stars glimmered on their armor, revealing names engraved on the hulls: New Eden, Dauntless, Valiant, Ark of Sol, each one a memory of sacrifice and endurance. Mason approached, carrying an old metal insignia in his hand. He held it out to her. "This was the mark of the First Terran Alliance," he said. "We carried it through every war. Keep it, as proof that we never stop believing." Lyra took it gently, feeling its weight. It was cold but alive, as if it carried the heartbeat of all who came before. "I'll make sure the galaxy hears your story," she said. Mason shook his head. "No, Queen Lyra. They'll hear our story." Suddenly, the deck trembled. Sensors blared to life. An alien transmission broke through the comms, hostile frequencies coded for Trivax fleets. "They've found us," the human officer shouted. "Enemy ships inbound." Lyra turned sharply. "How many?" "Hundreds," came the reply. Mason didn't flinch. He simply said, "Then we'll start the lesson early." Outside, the void filled with movement. The human dreadnoughts shifted formation, their weapons powering up with deep thunder. Trivax cruisers entered the sector, sleek, silver confident, unaware of what they were about to face. Lyra watched in awe as Mason gave a simple order. "Fire warning shots only." The human cannons roared, beams of white plasma tearing across the void. Not to destroy, but to warn. The Trivax ships faltered, their captains realizing too late who they had challenged. Within minutes they retreated, vanishing into hyperspace. Lyra turned to Mason, her voice trembling. "You could have wiped them out." Mason looked at her, eyes like iron. "Humanity doesn't fight for power," he said. "We fight for peace, but we never forget how to win." And as the silence returned to space, a signal went out across the galaxy once more. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as a force that could no longer be ignored. The vast chamber of the Galactic Council glowed under the light of 1,000 stars. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy filled the seats, scaled, feathered, luminous, and mechanical. All had gathered for one reason: humanity had returned. The silence was heavy, thick with fear and curiosity. Holographic screens shimmered above the council floor, showing images of human dreadnoughts drifting through space. Each ship was larger than anything built in centuries, every hull engraved with names that had once belonged to myths. Lyra stood at the center podium, her long silver robe flowing like liquid starlight. Behind her, the symbol of her world's alliance spun slowly, a mark of unity between her people and the unknown. Whispers echoed across the hall. "She's protecting the humans," some said. "She's leading them," said others. Lyra raised her hand, and the murmurs stopped. "My honored peers," she began, her voice soft but carrying through the vast chamber. "For generations we told stories about the war that ended humanity. We taught our children that they were violent, destructive, and reckless." Her words hung in the air. "And yet," she continued, "when the fires of war reached my home, when my people cried for mercy, it was not your fleets that came. It was a single human soldier." Gasps filled the chamber. Lyra's eyes burned with memory. "He saved me when I was a child, and then he vanished, like a ghost swallowed by the stars. But now he has returned, not to conquer, not to demand tribute, but to remind us what peace truly costs." At that moment, the great doors at the far end of the chamber opened. Every head turned as Captain Mason entered. He wore no crown, no armor of gold, only the same scarred battlesuit from the old wars. His presence alone silenced the room. Every delegate watched as he walked beside Lyra, his steps steady, his eyes calm. The guards stiffened but did not move. The legend himself was real. He stopped at the edge of the platform, glancing at the faces before him, creatures who once called his kind extinct. "I never thought I'd stand in this room again," he said, his voice deep. "Last time I was here, your fleets surrounded Earth." The council speaker, An ancient being with crystalline skin leaned forward. "Captain Mason," he said slowly, "humanity was declared a danger to civilization. You vanished into exile. Why return now?" Mason met his gaze without fear. "Because the same powers that caused that war are rising again, and because peace without truth is a lie." The speaker frowned. "And what truth do you bring?" Mason stepped forward. "The truth that humanity never sought domination. We fought because you left us no choice. We fought because someone had to stand between your empires and the innocent." The chamber erupted in noise, voices shouting, wings flaring, metal claws scraping. Lyra slammed her hand on the podium, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough!" Her eyes glowed with fury and sorrow. "You all claim to uphold peace, but you built it on graves. You erased the Terrans from history because you feared them, not because they were wrong. But I was there. I saw what they did. I saw how one human risked everything to save someone who wasn't even his own kind." The room fell into complete silence. Lyra's voice softened. "I stand here today not as a queen, not as a survivor, but as proof that humanity's heart still beats. And if you truly believe in peace, then you will listen." She turned to Mason, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. A soldier and a queen, two survivors of the same fire. He gave a small nod. "We don't want your pity," Mason said. "We don't want your forgiveness. We only want truth to return to the stars. The galaxy can hate us, but it will never again forget us." His words echoed through the chamber like thunder. No one dared speak. Even the speaker sat in silence. Then slowly Lyra stepped down from the platform and faced Mason. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear but with emotion. "You once told me, 'One day you'll understand why we fight,' and she said. 'Today I do. You fight not to rule but to protect. And the galaxy owes you more than silence." She bowed before him, a queen bowing to a human soldier. The act sent a shockwave through the council. Some gasped, others shouted, a few wept. It was the moment history itself bent. Mason looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Stand, Queen Lyra," he said. "The galaxy doesn't need slaves or rulers. It needs memory." The council speaker finally rose, his voice shaking slightly. Perhaps we judged your kind too harshly." Mason didn't answer. He simply turned toward the hologram of Earth, now glowing faintly blue in the projection, and said quietly, "The galaxy will judge itself soon enough. Outside, in the void beyond the council station, the human fleet remained in perfect formation, silent, patient, watching. Their engines glowed faintly, reflecting on the station's hull like a second sunrise. Lyra stood beside Mason as the chamber lights dimmed. She whispered, "You've changed everything." Mason shook his head. "No, your words did, and somewhere in that vast silence, every world in the galaxy realized that the return of humanity was not just the rise of a lost species. It was the awakening of truth." The transmission of Lyra's speech spread faster than light. Every planet, every station, every colony across the known galaxy received it. Even those hidden beyond the rim, forgotten by time. The image of a human soldier standing beside an alien queen burned into the minds of billions. In the markets of the core worlds, traders stopped mid-sentence as the hologram of Captain Mason appeared above them. In mining colonies, children looked up from their screens, whispering the word human, like it was a story come alive. But in the grand halls of power, the reaction was very different. Fear replaced reason, pride replaced truth. On the fortress world of Vornaxis, Supreme Chancellor Talrin of the Trivax Dominion slammed his claws onto the table. "They dare return," he roared. "They think they can scare us with myths and machines." His generals exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered, "Sir, our intelligence confirms thousands of Terran vessels in hidden orbit. Their technology appears centuries ahead of ours." Talrin's eyes glowed cold blue. "Then we will remind them who rules the stars." Across the galaxy, entire fleets scrambled into readiness. Ships rearmed, defense grids reactivated. News anchors shouted over each other. Analysts declared the return of humanity to be either salvation or apocalypse. Some called Mason a hero, others a monster. But no one could ignore him. Meanwhile, deep within the human dreadnought Dauntless, Mason watched the chaos unfold through a holomap. Dots blinked red across every major sector. Lyra stood beside him, silent. This is what truth does, Mason said, his tone heavy. It shatters comfort. Lyra looked at him, her voice soft but firm. Then let it shatter. It's time the galaxy remembered who saved it. In the following days, riots erupted on several worlds. On one planet, alien veterans carried old human flags they had once hidden after the war. On another, academies began rewriting their history lessons overnight, replacing lies with recordings from the archives that had been locked away. Humanity's sacrifice was no longer rumor, and it was fact. Still, fear grew. The Trivax Dominion began broadcasting its own propaganda, showing ancient footage of the Earth Wars. Do not trust them, their message blared. Humanity brings only destruction. But this time their words failed to convince. The galaxy had seen Mason's eyes, heard Lyra's voice. They had felt the truth in one distant sector. A small alien child asked her father, "Papa, were the humans really monsters?" Her father hesitated, then smiled faintly. "No, my star. They were the ones who taught monsters how to fear." The Galactic Council reconvened, the tension so thick it could be felt even through the air. "Humanity's presence will destabilize every peace treaty we have," one delegate shouted. Another replied, "They already have. You heard Lyra's speech. She called them the protectors of life." "Protectors?" sneered the Trivax representative. "They are destroyers. They turned our fleets into ash." "And yet," said another voice quietly, "they never conquered a single world." The chamber erupted again, accusations flying, but in the farthest seat, the council speaker finally spoke. "Perhaps," he said slowly. "The galaxy trembles not because humanity returned, but because we know deep down they were right." Outside the council station, the void glowed with silent movement. Human ships patrolled near the neutral zones but never fired. Never invaded. They simply watched, and their silence spoke louder than any threat. Lyra sat in her private quarters aboard the human flagship Ark of Sol, staring at the old insignia Mason had given her. She turned it in her hands, feeling the weight of destiny on her shoulders. A soft knock echoed through the room. Mason entered, his armor still marked from the recent confrontation. "They're afraid," he said. "Fear makes people desperate." Lyra met his eyes. "And what will you do when desperation becomes war?" Mason looked out the viewport where Earth's blue hologram rotated slowly. "Then we fight again, but this time not for vengeance or for remembrance." He walked closer, his voice low. "You changed everything, Lyra. Your words carried where human guns could not." Lyra shook her head. "No, Captain, you gave them a reason to listen." Just then, an alarm sounded through the deck. A human officer's voice came over the comm. "Unidentified fleets approaching from the outer sectors." Mason's eyes narrowed. "Trivax," he said quietly. Lyra stood. "They'll come for both of us now." Mason gave a thin smile. "Let them," he said. "History is watching." Moments later, the great viewing bay revealed the dark horizon filled with light. Dozens of enemy ships emerging from hyperspace. Their weapons charged, their formation tight, Lyra whispered. "So it begins." Mason nodded. "The galaxy trembles not because of war, but because it finally sees itself in the mirror. The human dreadnoughts aligned, their engines burning bright blue, every cannon locked in silent readiness. And for one breathless moment the galaxy held its breath, watching two forces, the past and the present, face each other across the stars. Then Mason spoke, not to his crew but to every world tuned to the transmission. "This is Captain Mason of the Terran Vanguard." His voice thundered through space. "We do not seek war, but we will not run from it. Humanity stands for those who cannot stand for themselves. Remember that before you fire." The channel cut, leaving silence so deep it felt endless. Across the galaxy, children stopped crying. Leaders stopped speaking, even the stars seemed to wait. And in that silence, the galaxy finally understood why it trembled. It wasn't fear of destruction, it was the return of conscience. The human fleet hung in stillness above the stars. Every ship, every crew member waited for Captain Mason's next command. The enemy fleets had paused their advance, confused by humanity's silence, but Mason wasn't looking at the enemy. His eyes were fixed on the galaxy map glowing before him, a map of every world that once turned against Earth. Lyra stood beside him, her hands trembling. The tension was thick, yet beneath it there was something else. Expectation. The galaxy had heard humanity speak. Now it demanded to know why they had disappeared. Mason took a slow breath. "They don't know the truth," he said quietly. Not about the war. Not about the price we paid. Lyra turned to him. Then tell them, she said. Tell them everything. Let the stars hear what they tried to bury, he nodded. And the crew opened a wideband transmission. The signal spread across every sector. Every screen, every communicator, every ship in seconds. The face of Captain Mason filled the skies of 1,000 worlds. This is Captain Mason of the Terran Vanguard. His voice was steady, like stone carved by centuries of storms. You know our name, but not our story. He paused, letting the silence settle. The Great War didn't begin because humanity wanted to conquer. It began because we said no. Gasps filled the council halls across the galaxy. Mason continued. When the Galactic Alliance demanded Earth's resources, when they told us to surrender our oceans and our children for their armies, we refused. We believed in freedom, and for that, the galaxy declared us dangerous. Images flickered behind him. Old footage restored from forgotten satellites. Alien fleets descending on Earth, cities burning, humanity fighting back. Not for power, but for survival. We fought not to rule the stars, but to protect them from those who would enslave them, Mason said. The Trivax Dominion called it rebellion, but it was resistance, and when the war turned, when we pushed them back, they did what cowards always do. They rewrote the truth. Lyra felt tears rise in her eyes. She had seen fragments of this in old archives, censored by her own ancestors. But now the full truth stood naked before the galaxy. Earth fell, Mason said, his voice soft now, not because we lost, but because we chose to save everyone else. He showed the final recordings. Human ships drawing enemy fleets away from civilian worlds. Human cities burning as evacuation transports carried alien refugees to safety. We bought you peace with our extinction, he said, and while your empires celebrated, we buried our dead and vanished into the void. All across the stars, people wept. Some whispered prayers, others simply watched in silence. Unable to breathe, the myth had become memory, and memory had become truth. Lyra stepped forward beside him, and while they hid, they still watched, she said. For centuries, humanity guarded the galaxy from the shadows, waiting for the day when history would demand its reckoning. On the council worlds, leaders panicked. Cut the broadcast. One shouted, destroy the transmission. But it was too late. The message was everywhere, unstoppable, carried through every relay, bouncing between colonies and ships like wildfire. Mason turned back to the camera, his expression calm. We forgave you long ago, he said, but we will not let the same war rise again. The Dominion builds its weapons in secret. They prepare for conquest once more. Humanity will not stand aside. The transmission ended. The screens went dark for several seconds. No one in the galaxy spoke. The silence felt endless. Then slowly, worlds began to respond. Messages flooded the Terran channels. Calls for alliance, for redemption, for unity. Species that had once feared humanity now begged for guidance. Soldiers who had fought against them generations ago saluted their flag again. Lyra turned to Mason, her voice barely a whisper. You changed everything. Mason shook his head. No, truth did, he said. We were never heroes, Lyra, we were just human. And sometimes that's enough. Outside the viewport, the stars glowed brighter as if they too had awakened. The human fleet adjusted formation, dreadnoughts moving to shield the weaker worlds. Their engines hummed with purpose. The Terran Vanguard had returned not to rule, but to protect in distant space. The Trivax Dominion received the transmission too. Their leader, Chancellor Tal Rin, crushed his data console in rage. So, the ghosts of Earth speak again, he hissed. Then let them burn with the stars they claim to save. He turned to his generals. Prepare the invasion fleets. Humanity wants to protect the galaxy. Then let them die doing it. Back aboard the Dauntless, Mason stared at the dark horizon. His reflection shimmered against the stars. They're coming, he said quietly. Lyra stepped closer. And we'll face them together. He smiled faintly. The kind of smile born from old battles. Good, he said. Because this time, the galaxy will finally remember who we are. The alarms began to hum. One by one, red lights pulsed across the decks. Engines powered up, cannons aligned. The Terran Vanguard stood ready once again. And as the first enemy signatures appeared on the edge of the stars burned red as the Trivax Armada entered Terran space. Hundreds of ships, their engines screaming through the void. The galaxy watched the live transmissions in silence. billions holding their breath. They had seen humanity's truth. Now they would witness humanity's answer. Inside the command deck of the Dauntless, Captain Mason stood still, his eyes fixed on the massive enemy fleet spreading across the horizon. He could hear the whispers of his ancestors in the hum of the engines, the echo of every soldier who had once sworn to protect Earth. "All stations ready," reported his first officer. "Shields up, weapons online." Mason nodded once, his voice calm. "Hold fire." The command crew exchanged shocked looks. "Sir, they're charging weapons," one officer said. "If we don't strike first," Mason raised his hand. "They need to make the first mistake," he said quietly. "The galaxy is watching, and today, it will learn what it means to be human." Queen Lyra entered the deck, her robe flowing like silver light. She looked at the displays, thousands of enemy signatures flickering like a swarm of locusts. "They came prepared," she said softly. Mason smiled faintly. "So did we." From the shadows of the nebula, the hidden Terran fleets began to move. Enormous dreadnoughts older than most civilizations emerged like awakening titans, their hulls still scarred from ancient wars, their cannons glowing white-hot. Behind them, carriers deployed waves of human starfighters, small but deadly. The Trivax commander, confident in his numbers, opened a channel. His image filled the Dauntless bridge, a creature of steel and arrogance. "You should have stayed dead, human," he hissed. "Your time ended centuries ago." Mason's reply was quiet, but his words carried the weight of 1,000 years. "Then you've learned nothing from history." Without warning, the Trivax fleet fired. The darkness exploded with fire and plasma, beams of energy tearing through the void. The human dreadnoughts held formation, their shields absorbing the storm. The first wave of enemy ships closed in, and that was when Mason gave the order. "Return fire," the Dauntless roared. Its cannons unleashed beams so bright they painted the stars white. The first volley tore through enemy lines, shredding destroyers like paper. Dozens of Trivax cruisers broke apart in silence, their wreckage spiraling into the abyss. All across the galaxy, the broadcast continued. Planets watched in stunned awe as humanity, thought extinct, fought like a force of nature, precise, disciplined, unstoppable. On the council world of Illyrian, delegates stood frozen before the screens. "They're not fighting for revenge," one whispered. "They're defending us," another murmured. "They're defending everyone." Lyra stood beside Mason as the battle raged. The deck shuddered from the impact of returning fire. "We can't hold forever," an officer called. "We don't need forever," Mason replied. "Just long enough for them to see." He activated the ship's external speakers. His voice echoed across every comm channel in the system. To the fleets watching, he said, "To every world that remembers the fire, we are not your enemies. We never were. We fight so no one else has to. We fight because peace demands protectors." His words reached even the enemy. Many Trivax soldiers hesitated, watching their scanners as their own ships were torn apart. They saw the humans fighting not for conquest but for survival, for meaning, for honor. Lyra watched him, her heart filled with emotion. "This is what you meant," she whispered. "This is why you fight." Mason looked at her, his face calm despite the chaos. Every human life we lost was a promise, that the galaxy would never burn like Earth did. The battle reached its peak. The Trivax flagship unleashed a final superweapon, a beam powerful enough to pierce through even Terran shields. The Dauntless trembled as the impact struck, alarms blared, crew thrown to the floor. Lyra staggered, but Mason steadied her. "Evacuate?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, we finished this." He turned to the tactical officer. "Redirect all remaining power to the main railgun." "Sir, that will overload the core." "Then let's make it count." The massive railgun at the front of the Dauntless charged, its energy core glowing brighter than a sun. Mason took one final look at Lyra. "Tell them," he said softly. "Tell them humanity kept its promise." Then he gave the final command, "Fire." The beam erupted, slicing through the Trivax flagship, cutting it clean in half. The explosion consumed everything in light. The shockwave rippled through space, silent but immense when the light faded. The battlefield was still. The Trivax fleet was gone. The human dreadnought stood battered but unbroken. The transmission continued, broadcasting the aftermath to every corner of the galaxy. Queen Lyra stood on the deck, surrounded by the quiet hum of victory and loss. Mason was gone, his ship's command core destroyed in the blast. Only his voice, recorded moments before firing, remained. "If you're hearing this," his voice said, then humanity kept its word. "We did not rise to rule, but to remind you and that peace must be earned." Every single day, tears filled Lyra's eyes as she looked out at the stars. "Rest, Captain," she whispered. "The galaxy remembers." On distant worlds, entire populations fell silent. Flags rose bearing the Terran insignia, not as a mark of fear but of respect. Monuments lit up with the words Mason had spoken. Humanity endures. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy truly fell silent, not from terror but from awe, because the race they had tried to erase had become something more than legend. They had become the soul of the stars, Canner. The galaxy watched, trembling not from fear, but from the weight of the truth it had just learned.